The United States of America prides itself on being the land of opportunity and justice for all. However, the dark legacy of slavery continues to cast a long shadow over this nation's history. See, the time has come for the American government, both at the state and federal levels, to acknowledge the profound injustices suffered by us foundational Black Americans, freedmen, and take steps towards reparations. It's imperative that we address the loss of stolen property and the enduring harm inflicted and the systematic denial of equal opportunities faced by the descendants of American slavery. Restitution. The restoration of something lost or stolen to its property owner. Throughout American history, the government has either directly seized or allowed the confiscation of property from Black Americans. We understand that this injustice has manifested in various forms such as land theft, discriminatory lending practices, and the denial of inheritance rights. The economic disparities faced by Black Americans today can be directly traced back to these systematic injustices that we still endure some today. Providing restitution in the form of land grants and direct cash payments will somewhat help rectify this historic injustice, enabling descendants of American slaves to build wealth and break free from the cycles of poverty and inequality. At the beginning of the 20th century, Black Americans owned at least 14 million acres of land. And by the 21st century, 90% of that land had been stolen from us. Black Americans only owned 1.1 million acres of farmland and part owners of another 1.07 million acres. Across a century, white farmers and landowners developed multiple ways to take Black Americans' land using methods such as Harris property, tax sales, and Torrance Act. In Mississippi alone, the land stolen from the 1950s to the mid-1960s totaled up to 800,000 acres. And this is what a research team calculated, that the amount is upwards to 6.6 billion in today's dollars. This is what our people have endured. But I digress. Recompense. Make amends to someone or group for loss or harm suffered. The legacy of slavery, Jim Crow, Reconstruction continues to impact us Black Americans today. The brutal treatment, physical abuse, and psychological trauma endured by our ancestors through slavery, as well as Jim Crow and current day lynchings. This cannot be ignored or minimized. See, compensation is necessary to acknowledge the suffering and hardship imposed upon Black Americans throughout our history. By providing reparations, the American government can acknowledge its responsibility for these atrocities and work towards healing the wounds that still exist today. Because this time in history, in 1860, over $3 billion was assigned to the physical bodies of enslaved Black Americans to be used as free labor and production. This was more money than was invested in factories and railroads combined. In 1861, the value placed on cotton produced by enslaved Blacks was $250 million. Slavery enriched white slave owners and their descendants, and it fueled the country's economy while suppressing wealth building for the enslaved. The United States has yet to compensate descendants of enslaved Black Americans for labors. Lastly, reparations. The making of amends for a wrong one has done by paying money. We can combine these as well as restitution, recompense, and reparations, because freedmen, AKA foundational Black Americans, have faced persistent barriers to progress and opportunities. Despite the end of slavery, discriminatory policies, and institutional racism persisted through Jim Crow, segregation, and systematic oppression. To redress these historical wrongs, the American government should establish a comprehensive reparations program. Now, this program should include direct cash payments to descendants of American slaves, ensuring economic empowerment in addressing the wealth gap, and additionally, land grants could offer opportunities for home ownership and wealth accumulation. Now, by taking these measures, the government can begin to dismantle the system of white supremacy, as well as the structural inequalities that have plagued black communities for generations. When did this start? The whole reparations conversation. Because we understand after the war, radical Republicans, as I stated, our people were Republicans and not Democrats at a time in history. They passed laws requiring confiscation of former Confederate properties to provide the ex-slaves with 40 acres and a mule. In 1866, President Andrew Johnson vetoed the legislation, so it would not occur. The next push for reparations took place at the turn of the century. Several black organizations lobbied Congress to provide pensions for former slaves and their children. The one bill introduced into the U.S. Senate in 1894 would have granted direct cash payments up to $500 to all ex-slaves, plus monthly pensions ranging from $4 to $15. This and several similar bills died in congressional committees. The pension mood itself faded away, of course, with the onset of World War I. This is similar, but not exact, to the packages that the Native Americans received. They received direct cash payments as well, monthly and yearly stipends from the federal government. We know this stemmed from Special Order Number 15, in which General Sherman, William T. Sherman, issued this order. And what we must understand is that President Lincoln did approve of this. It states here, Special Order Number 15. The order redistributed the roughly 400,000 acres of land to newly freed black families in 40-acre segments. Lincoln approved Field Order Number 15 before Sherman issued it just 4 days after meeting with the black leaders. Congressional leaders convinced President Lincoln to establish the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands on March 3, 1865. Shortly after Sherman issued his order, the Freedmen's Bureau, just as well as the Indian Bureau of Affairs, as it came to be called, was authorized to give legal title for 40-acre plots of land to freemen and white Southern Unionists, the ones who assisted in the allocation of land as well as helping to free the slaves. Now, although Sherman's Special Order Number 15 had no tangible benefit for black citizens after President Johnson's vetoed the bill, the present-day movement supporting reparations has pointed to it as the U.S. government's promise to make restitution to black Americans for enslavement. See, the reestablishment of the Freedmen's Bureau would provide critical support for black Americans in their pursuit of reparations. The original Freedmen's Bureau, which we said earlier was established in 1865, played a vital role in assisting newly freed slaves in education, employment, and health care. By revitalizing this institution, the government can demonstrate its commitment to rectifying historical injustices and empowering us black communities. The modern Freedmen's Bureau will serve as a catalyst for economic development, educational opportunities, and social advancement, addressing the systematic barriers that have hindered black Americans' progress for far too long. The United States can move forward as just as equitable society without confronting its painful past and addressing the ongoing consequences of slavery and systematic racism. Reparation in the form of direct cash payments, land grants, the reestablishment of the Freedmen's Bureau, and the designation of black Americans as a protective class are essential steps towards rectifying historical injustices and promoting healing By fulfilling its moral obligation to descendants of American slaves, the American government can take a significant stride towards a more inclusive and so-called equal nation. It is time to prioritize restitution, recompense, and reparations to ensure a brighter future for all Americans.